Hello and welcome to Timeless with Julie Hartman Live. It is Monday, November 25th, 2024. I'm Julie Hartman, and it is great, as always, to be with you. 844-861-5537 is the call-in number, 844-861-5537. And as always, you can use the live chat. Now, today, we're going to go down a little walk, or I should say we're going down a walk down memory lane. History lane, that is, as I actually did this weekend. This weekend, I was at the Harvard-Yale game in Cambridge, Massachusetts at my old stomping grounds, and it was so cold. Oh my gosh, it made me really appreciate living in Los Angeles. And it's funny because my parents picked me up at the airport last night, and they were driving me, and they said, "Julie, were you sad that Harvard lost the game?" And I have to say, it was my first time hearing that Harvard lost the game. We don't care at all about who wins or loses the game. I thought that might be a fun tidbit for you to know. I can promise you, and somebody should really do this, if you went up to the average Harvard student or Yale student on these campuses after the game and you gave them a microphone and said, "Hey, tell me who won the game this year," probably 50% would not know the answer to that question. So I don't know what to say about that. We're nerds. We don't care about football. I don't know. Sean, what do you think? Welcome, Sean McConnell. As always, from the producer's dungeon. Were you aware that Harvard lost the game? Oh, and he's silent, which means that he is not aware that Harvard lost the game, or he doesn't care that Harvard lost the game.
No, I didn't know. I don't. I watch football. I watch college football, but I'm worried about the echo that I'm hearing right now. That's why I turned off my mic.
Well, that's okay. Well, shifting.
Can you name one player from Harvard football?
The quarterback? I can name a position.
His actual name.
No, I can't. I can't name any. And by the way, I don't think I could be able to name any other in NFL sports besides Travis Kelce or Kelsey, the Taylor Swift one. Yeah. Besides that, I have no idea. But shifting to something more substantive, quickly, I want to tell you again about this book. It's called Elevator Pitches for God. It's a book that I wrote in. I'm a contributor alongside 69 other individuals who wrote one-page essays about why they believe in God. And it's really a magnificent book, and I'm not saying that because I'm in it. I don't get a dime from any of the proceeds. The people who started this project launched a nonprofit in order to fund the project. It is really, really good, though. It has contributions from Jews, Muslims, Christians, atheists, people who maybe don't believe in God but nevertheless think that having a belief in God is worthwhile, or subscribing to Judeo-Christian values is valuable. We have people ranging from Seth Dillon, the CEO of the Babylon Bee, to the writer of the TV show Friends, to Alan Dershowitz, to someone like me. And right now, because you are an exclusive Timeless listener, you can get this book for 45% off. And Christmas is around the corner. I'm telling you again, I don't get a dime from this. This is a really amazing book because you get so many people with such different worldviews telling why they believe in God. So you can go online to EP.
I paid full price.
Oh my gosh. Wow. No echo in that, but nevertheless, we heard your anger loud and clear. Well, going to a very good cause that you paid full price. I also paid full price and gifted the book to like 5 people. You can get it for 45% off if you use the code Julie Hartman. That's my name, JulieHartman. You can get it for $19.80. I am telling you, it is a fantastic Christmas gift. Go again to ep4g.com. That's EP number 4g.com and get 45% off of the book and use the promo code Julie Hartman. Now you may, the next round of the book, see some pretty cool second round contributors, maybe including our producer here in the producer's dungeon. I'm exposing him. He was asked to contribute alongside Spencer Clavin and some other fantastic people, and I have no idea if he accepted or declined. We'll check in on that.
I don't feel worthy. I've said that.
Well, clearly.
But if it keeps me from paying full price.
Well, clearly the organizers of the book think think otherwise, as do I. I think you would write a fantastic tribute. I mean, my God, Sean, you've been Ben Shapiro's producer, Larry Elder's producer, Dennis Prager's producer, my producer. I mean, you've been in front of some people who have pretty sturdy beliefs in God, and you grew up as an altar boy, Sean Regis. So I think you should be in the second round. All right, so on to the main topic today. I said we're going to be walking down memory lane, and I want to do a little bit of a history episode today. This is something that Sean has been encouraging me to do for some time, not just a history episode, but this specific history episode. We're going to be looking at a very prescient speech that was delivered by President Dwight Eisenhower in January of 1961. It was his farewell address to the nation after serving as president of the United States. And by the way, I said that most people from Harvard and Yale do not know the outcome of the annual football game. I bet a lot of people from any place around this country would not know that Dwight Eisenhower served as the head of the Army in World War II. I didn't know that until fairly recently, really since working with Dennis. And I also learned through working with Dennis about President Eisenhower is that he is almost personally responsible for the fact that we have video and photographic evidence of the Holocaust. When the Allies liberated Auschwitz and many of the other concentration camps in Eastern Europe, apparently President Eisenhower said, we have to take photos of this because people will never believe that this happened. And so thank God he did. I mean, people, to my horror, still somehow believe that it didn't happen. But can you imagine if there wasn't any kind of evidence in terms of video or pictures? So, my gosh, we certainly owe him a debt of gratitude for that. But President Eisenhower delivered a truly fascinating speech on January 17th, 1961 from the Oval Office. And we're going to be playing excerpts of that today because he talked about the military-industrial complex. Now, this is something that many Americans, I think, now tend to be pretty divided on somewhat. Certainly compared to other things, it's pretty minuscule in terms of our divisions. But for a long time, certain people have been talking about a military-industrial complex, that there is this kind of fourth branch of government or this apparatus that is its own machine that contributes so much to our culture and certainly to our public policy. Many people blamed the military-industrial complex, most obviously, for our ill-advised, to put it mildly, invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan, that it enriched the defense contractor companies, that it enriched the lives of journalists and people who could report on this, and researchers and think tanks, that we essentially went to war in order to keep our economy going. And, the more you look into it, the more you may not be so skeptical of a kind of viewpoint like that. And it is so interesting to see that as far back as 1961, President Eisenhower was warning us about this. And now I would say that this issue, and not just the military-industrial complex, but I think the industrial complex of industrial complexes in this country. We have a lot of industrial complexes. Complex I. I think that is a front and center issue of this incoming Trump administration. We have DOGE, for instance, the Department of Government Efficiency, headed by Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk, which is endeavoring to cut the federal government like cutting meat, getting the fat off of it and just going to the lean material, because there are so many offices and bureaus and, three-letter organizations, and really few of us understand what they are actually doing, but all of us are funding them.
3 million employees.
Yeah.
That are permanent. And people argue that is the fourth wing of the government.
Oh, absolutely. The many industrial complexes, I think, are the fourth wing of government. There's the climate industrial complex. There's certainly, dear Lord, the DEI industrial complex. I even said the other day on the show, there's a Trump derangement industrial complex. Seriously. We can think of so many people who've written books and columns and op-ed contributions and given speeches and gotten tenureship at universities for their opposition to Donald Trump and their pursuit of defending democracy against authoritarianism. We have so many things. You know, Abigail Schreier talked about the therapy industrial complex, which dovetails with the big pharma industrial complex. Yes.
Elon Musk was on with Joe Rogan. He joked that there are 439 agencies, and he doubts that one human being can name them all.
Totally. I can't even probably name 15 of them or 20 of them. And so I want to look at this speech not just with an eye towards the military industrial complex, because I really think in the wake of Iraq and Afghanistan, we've sort of come to understand its existence. Though I will have you know that a lot of our spending continues to go towards our defense, which is not a bad thing. Sean and I were talking before the show about how China has in many ways superseded the United States military. But we give so much money, and we'll talk about this, to universities. We give so much money to defense contracting. And it really raises the question of, is all of this worth it? This is all of our taxpayer money. And we're not only giving it to defense and to research, we're giving it to our education system, we're giving it to Social Security, we're giving it to pave our roads, and we can't just give all of our money or 50% of our income to things that are wasteful. So I hope that this second administration is going to be a huge reckoning, to use a lib word, for how much money we spend on these things that are at this point just a machine. And I kind of zoomed past it, but I do want to say one more time that Abigail Schreier's therapy industrial complex book is so incredible. The way that we have medicalized normal human emotions. We tell 12-year-olds that they've been through trauma if their cat died, or that they have severe social anxiety if they're just shy kids. And then you start to see how much money these therapists are making, how much money in turn our big pharma makes from prescribing all of these medications, which record numbers of youth are on. And so even, you know what? I'll give a final example before we look at this speech. Look at what RFK is spearheading. There is a fat industrial complex in America, a food industrial complex. So look at what Dwight Eisenhower is saying here, and you'll see how indeed prescient it is. So let's start with the first clip. This is clip one. It actually doesn't have anything to do with our discussion of the industrial complexes. He thanks the media in the first part, and I think that is so interesting and worth looking at.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. First, I should like to express my gratitude to the radio and television networks for the opportunities they have given me over the years to bring reports and messages to our nation. My special thanks go to them for the opportunity of addressing you this evening.
Can you picture now a Republican president thanking the media? But it shows you how different things are. I mean, really, you do get an appreciation for the original function of media and the original transformation that it brought to society. For so long in our country, and not just in our country, everywhere in the world, we couldn't see the face on television of the President of the United States or have him or her directly address us. And so it is a nice thing to kind of have some respect for the modern mediums. And also that indicates that the media was at least somewhat impartial back then. Even if you look at the presidency of JFK, he was sleeping around with a lot of different women, including here in Los Angeles, Marilyn Monroe. And I've read a lot of biographies of the former president. And what biographer after biographer says is that the media actually tried to suppress these affairs because they didn't want to make the president look bad, and in turn, tarnish the reputation of the presidency of the United States. Oh, how the tables turn. All right, let's go on to this second clip. Again, this is in January of 1961. President Eisenhower, on his way out, is thanking the public, thanking the media, thanking members of Congress, but he's issuing a warning. And it's really important for us to realize that this is the warning that he chooses. Can you imagine? He led our forces during World War II. He was the president of the United States. And this is the thing that he pinpoints as his final message on the way out. It's pretty spectacular. Let's start. He kind of tees up the issue. Clip 2.
We now stand 10 years past the midpoint of a century that has witnessed 4 major wars among great nations. 3 of these involved our own country. Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations.
You know, my mom has a saying in the realm of parenting. She says, small kids, small problems. Big kids, big problems. And that is so relatable to what we are seeing now. Don't you look at that and kind of envy the position that we were in 1961, or certainly before that, when things were just so much more simple? War was flying planes, landing troops, and certainly, you know, as time went on, dropping bombs. Now, my God, we've been catapulted into this world of cyber warfare, of electronic warfare, of drone warfare, of even space warfare. I mean, Donald Trump in his first presidency created, what was it called? The Space Force, in order to combat space threats. Do you know that China and Russia have said that they are going to build, or they're in the process right now of building, a jointly manned moon base by 2035? That is crazy. They also have killer satellites, which are designed to do just what it sounds like, to go into outer space and kill other satellites of other nations. And we just cannot conceptualize as a people how debilitating that would be to us, not only in times of warfare, but in our everyday lives. It's because of satellite technology that we have GPS on our smartphones. It's because of satellite technology that we are able to keep our airspace secure, for planes to navigate it, thanks to air traffic control. There are so many things that are a part of our daily lives that are because of satellites. And literally right now in space, there are these other satellites that are designed to just knock those out and basically render us blind and deaf in the case of a conflict. And so what Eisenhower stipulates here, which I think is very on the nose, is that not only is this military-industrial complex a problem, it's also necessary. We have to have kind of a military-industrial complex because technology is advancing at such a rate where we have to keep up. But we need to keep it in its proper place. And what we're going to hear him say is that it, even then in 1961, was already starting to morph into something that wasn't in its proper place. I saw that Sean maybe wanted to cut in. I yield the floor.
Oh, no, just you started with the clip of him thanking the media, and you made your commentary about how the media has changed and how strange that is. I also take away from that the dignified nature of the man in the office of president and how much that has changed.
True.
And as we listen to him, I think you see that's very clear. And I don't know what the exact quote is, but somebody once said, if there is a World War III, I don't know how it will end, but I know World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones.
Ooh. I think, you know what? You know who I think said that? Vladimir Putin. Look it up. I was just writing an article recently on him, and I think he was the one who said that, which is very concerning given that he would be in a pretty big position of power in order to make that reality of World War IV possible. So we have this problem where we have a military-industrial complex, but we also kind of need a military-industrial complex. Let's listen to how he further analyzes this. And then he goes into talking about universities and spending, which are two of our primary manifestations of this complex. Let's start by rolling clip 3.
Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
You know, as I listen to Eisenhower saying that, something that comes to mind is Yuri Bezmenov, who we have profiled on this show many, many, many times before. I think he's probably the most important name for people to know in the United States right now. Quick background, he was in the KGB in the Soviet Union, and then he defected to Canada and exposed the mechanisms of ideological warfare that the Soviet Union was intending to exact on the United States. We tend to think of warfare as physical. We don't conceptualize that it can also be, and primarily is in most cases, psychological. Sun Tzu, in his famous book, The Art of Warfare, he stipulates in Article 1 that you should endeavor to subdue the enemy without directly fighting them. And Yuri Bezmenov goes through and he outlines the ways that through spies, through media, through all these mechanisms, the Soviet Union was trying to demoralize and inculcate confusion in the minds of those in the United States. And you literally see on a chart the stated goals of the Soviet Union. And it says, as I had mentioned, demoralization, ignorance, uninformed myopia, disunity, isolation, a feeling of other from your fellow citizens. And then you look around and you see how staggeringly effective that's been. And so Eisenhower is talking about the co-option of the government for purposes that may not really be in line with what we would hope would be the noblest and truest instincts of the United States. And although he doesn't say it overtly, I would imagine that he had a suspicion that this would be able to be taken advantage of by enemy forces. Because think about it. We have such a free society, as we know now from our open border, where if you want to control certain things in the world, if you want to lead the world towards a closer outcome that you endeavor, you would go into a free country with a lot of power like the United States and try to switch the levers in your favor. One of the biggest problems that we have is actually a result of our freedom. It's because we have allowed so many people to come here. And in many ways, it's been fantastic. It's because we've allowed so many ideas to be spoken and take hold that we've seen a lot of our societal decay. I mean, even if you look at wokeism, I'm someone who is a staunch defender of the First Amendment. Of course, you should be allowed to say whatever you want. But you also need to recognize that it's because we can say whatever we want that certain ideas like this have been allowed to take hold. In Russia or in China, for example, the reason, in large part, that they don't have a similar woke movement is because that stuff is stamped out as fast as it comes in. They're not even allowed to say anything like that. And so the kind of freedom of speech that we have, the downside to it is that it also makes it seem like anything that is spoken deserves a degree of ideological or intellectual legitimacy. And that, I think, is part and parcel of this industrial complex, where we just allow people and corporations and companies to come in and have control over the American agenda. And we don't always see that we're being taken advantage of by people who are speaking in the name of our values, but may actually be there in the first place in order to subvert them. He goes on to talk about the university, which, oh my gosh, I think is so prescient here. How, because of this military industrial complex, and then I would like to contend because of the many other industrial complexes, the university has really shifted in its American role. And it has become the chief engineer of this very thing that he's lamenting. Clip 4.
Akin to and largely responsible for the sweeping changes in our industrial military posture has been the technological revolution during recent decades. In this revolution, research has become central. It also becomes more formalized, complex, and costly. A steadily increasing share is conducted for, by, or at the direction of the federal government. Today, the solitary inventor, tinkering in his shop, has been overshadowed by task forces of scientists in laboratories and testing fields. In the same fashion, the free university, historically the fountainhead of free ideas and scientific discovery, has experienced a revolution in the conduct of research. Partly because of the huge costs involved, a government contract becomes virtually a substitute for intellectual curiosity. For every old blackboard, there are now hundreds of new electronic computers. The prospect of domination of the nation's scholars by federal employment, project allocations, and the power of money is ever present and is gravely to be regarded. Yet in holding scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite. It is the task of statesmanship to mold, to balance, and to integrate these and other forces, new and old, within the principles of our democratic system, ever aiming toward the supreme goals of our free society.
Here's what I love about this speech. He just said 5 things that in some ways have to do with the military-industrial complex, but in other ways don't, that are so on the nose about what we are experiencing now. I mean, I think that Trump and Vance should really play this speech, or perhaps they're aware of it, or they got to dust off their old history textbooks and reread it, because this is dynamite, what he just said. Where do I even begin? I mean, look at what he even said about task forces. I was trying to picture myself listening to that speech and if I were living in 1961. And the idea of a task force sounds like something great. Sounds like something efficient and focused. A task force. Oh, that's great. You're going to give these smart minds at these universities a task or a goal, and you give them the funding and the research to do it. Why wouldn't you do it? And then now, I'm sure I am not alone in saying that when I hear those 2 words, task force, my eyes glaze over and I know exactly what it means, which is basically a committee that does nothing and is bloated with funding that largely goes out the window, or even worse, produces some crazy ideas. And so at once it's interesting and also very demoralizing to kind of watch how all of this has grown. And you can see that it makes sense that we were dragged into 2 world wars. We got into other wars. People debate whether we should have or should not have. Korea and Vietnam at the time of Eisenhower, obviously. And we want to find a way to take advantage of our institutions. We want to take advantage of up-and-coming bright minds. We want to maybe give people work. We're also trying to keep up with the pace of technological innovation. And we can see how some of these things like government contracts or primarily research-focused universities come into play. But as Dwight Eisenhower keeps saying, we have to keep them in their place. And it reminds me of that fantastic John Adams quote from the Federalist Papers, where he said that the Constitution of the United States is meant for a religious people. And you notice in there that Dwight Eisenhower, I think already 2 times in the videos that we've watched, he throws around the term spiritual. He said this is having spiritual effects on us. John Adams said the Constitution was made for a religious people. It is wholly inadequate for a people who are not. And he said that if ever we stray away from the religious fiber that holds our country together, the principles of our Constitution will break away and become untethered, like a whale breaking through the cords of a tight net. That is such a powerful visual, and I think that's exactly what happened here with the military-industrial complex, where people started seeing, oh my God, I can get a government contract. I can get millions of dollars for my department, or, I can get a job at this place. And you can see how people come in and use it for their own purposes. He even referenced there the power of money to be taken advantage of by a certain elite. You know what that made me think of? Not just the military industrial complex. As I had mentioned, the DEI industrial complex, or the gender industrial complex. How did we get to a place in American society where we have federally funded ethnic studies programs, federally funded gender and sexuality departments, where people are coming out and they are truly looking at you in the eye and in a dead serious way saying that there are more than two genders? We got to this place because of the road that we started to go down here, with a relentless amount of funding and this push for research and new ideas. And while in many ways this has been a blessing in science and technology and STEM, certainly I think universities have done a magnificent job with coming up with new inventions. On the plane, this is a little off topic, but I was actually watching The Social Network for the first time in my life. And that's off topic in the sense that it wasn't a federally funded program or research place. But Mark Zuckerberg founded Facebook at Harvard, and he was very embedded in the computer science department. And look at the way that changed the world. Certainly in science and technology, some of these programs have been great. But what's happened is they've bled over into the realm of humanities. And while science and technology is always changing, and you should endeavor to improve and change it, what we don't realize as a country is that human nature doesn't change. Human nature shouldn't be relentlessly researched for new findings. Human nature has to be studied and conserved. It's timeless, it's eternal across all different societies from many parts of time in many different places. There have been truths revealed time and time again about human nature. And so we see here that these departments and these individuals who are trying to get federal funding and who are trying to get a robust hiring program and get tenureship perhaps at an elite university, and they're in the humanities department, you can see how they come up with crackpot ideas like there are 38 genders. Because it can just push on their research. I want to tell you, though, that if you look at the allocation that the U.S. government gives to universities for this kind of research, it's a lot. In 2022, this is according to the National Science Foundation, the U.S. government gave $54 billion to research and development, which was 55% of the total research and development expenditures at universities. Isn't that amazing? It's a lot. And you wonder what this would be like if we just left it to the private sector. A lot of the times I talk with people about this and they'll go, well, how else would we get, the technological innovations that we have? We would probably do a better job if we just left it to the private sector. Because when the government is controlling, he who has the gold makes the rules. They get to push an agenda on people, and students and up-and-coming great minds may have more freedom to actually make better things if they actually had the freedom to make better things. Department of Health and Human Services, just some other examples. This is the largest federal funder. They contribute $30 billion towards research and development at universities, which again, sounds great in some ways, and it certainly has been a blessing in some ways. But then you also, as we as Americans learned over the past 4 years, see the vaccine industrial complex and the medication industrial complex. And you start to go, okay, is this a little bit overbloated here? All right, let's go to, oh gosh, I know Sean's really going to love this part of the video. This is the part where Dwight Eisenhower starts talking about how irresponsible we are with spending. Clip 5.
As we peer into society's future, we, you and I, and our government must avoid the impulse to live only for today, plundering for our own ease and convenience the precious resources of tomorrow. We cannot mortgage the material assets of our grandchildren without risking the loss also of their political and spiritual heritage. We want democracy to survive for all generations to come, not to become the insolvent phantom of tomorrow.
How much does Trump and Vance need to hear this speech and play the speech at, I guess they're not having rallies anymore, but you know what? They should actually play it at the inauguration. That would be really, really cool. Did you know that our national debt right now is larger than our GDP? Our GDP is about $29 trillion, and we are $36 trillion in national debt. That is really, really bad. And half of our debt is financed short term. If you care to do a deeper dive, you should check out my video on the debt that I did a few months ago. Probably it's gone up $1 trillion since I even filmed it then. But half of our debt is financed short term, which means that it rolls over to new interest rates. In 2022, we, the United States federal government, paid $476 billion alone just in interest on the national debt. And so we not only have to pay back principal, we are going at an exponential rate because of interest. And Dwight Eisenhower, who was speaking several decades before these wars happened, was pretty prescient when he warned about this, because $7 trillion, according to the Brown University Cost of War Index, went towards the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. $7 trillion. And you look at those wars, and again, this is something that people, especially my age, just do not have an appreciation for. I was born at the very end of 1999. And growing up, I mean, we invaded Iraq or Afghanistan, I believe, in 2001, and then Iraq in 2003. Growing up, I was obviously too young to know very much about those wars at that time. But even into my older adolescent years and then my teenage years, we really never talked about the Iraq and Afghanistan war. I don't know about you, Sean, or people in the chat or producer's dungeon. It just wasn't a big deal. It wasn't something that all of us were really made aware of, at least, and it could have been because I was so young. But I always thought, oh, well, there must be a justified reason that we're doing this. This must totally make sense. And then when I went to college and took a foreign policy class and had to write a paper about this, I realized just how crazily ill-advised those wars were. To give us all a refresher, Al-Qaeda was behind the September 11th terrorist attack, headed by Osama bin Laden, who was born in Pakistan, but went into the mountains of Afghanistan to train Al-Qaeda in order to exact this terrorist attack. Now, our logic was that we would invade Afghanistan because Afghanistan essentially provided a safe harbor to Al-Qaeda to train in the mountains in order to carry out this attack. But there is large evidence that the Taliban actually did not know that Osama bin Laden was going to carry out that attack in the United States of America. Now, certainly, they probably knew he was up to no good, and they probably knew that he was training them to do something horrible to the United States. But actually, after September 11th, many members of the Afghan government and the Taliban were actually like, oh my gosh, why didn't you tell us? We don't want the United States to come in and invade our country. And to think about the fact that we invaded Afghanistan when we could have at the time just done drone strikes or done targeted assassinations like we did with Osama bin Laden, the fact that we invaded an entire country times two, it really does raise the question, why? Why, when we could have done this in a much more efficient way, did we go all out? And it points to what Dwight Eisenhower is saying here. And then you look at the example of Iraq, and it becomes even more dizzying. Saddam Hussein was a horrible person, the dictator of Iraq, the head of the Ba'athist Party, but he was a Sunni secular dictator of his own country. Osama bin Laden was a Sunni religious fundamentalist, head of Al-Qaeda, which had nothing to do with Iraq. They were terrible people, but Iraq had literally nothing to do with 9/11. Afghanistan, there was some semblance of a connection because Osama bin Laden was training al-Qaeda in the mountains. But with Iraq, there was literally no connection. Even this whole weapons of mass destruction, which was found to have been not true, even if it was true that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction, why would the United States see it as being in our interest to go in and invade Iraq? Saddam Hussein, after the first Gulf War, he was defeated, in thanks to the help that we provided to Kuwait. But he was defeated and really was just focused on maintaining power in his own country. As horrible as it might have been, his intention of using chemical weapons, which he didn't even possess, or weapons of mass destruction, it really seems would have been levied on his own people and not in a wider context. And so you look at all these facts, and yes, sometimes as a country, I mean, certainly many times we've made mistakes, but these are such staggering realities, and the proportion of our invasions and our involvement in these places was so vast that it really does make you wonder what was really going on. You know? What were the strings really being pulled there? Yeah.
I think you have to follow the money. And
yeah, and he said that.
He
said that.
Yeah, these industrial complexes you're talking about, one of the largest is oil. It makes the pharmaceutical industry look small. And so you had, and there was, I believe at the time, I was young, but at the time they were saying they were getting defense contracts, kickbacks during that time under Cheney. And then you look at the funding for Ukraine, for this war that never seems to end. Where's that money going? At the end of the day, we the people have to pay attention to this kind of stuff. And this is where we have to clean things up. There cannot be, it's important to have military strength. It's important that that military strength belongs to the United States, because I believe we are, compared to other countries, more benevolent with our execution of that military than other countries. And the world is a better place because of that. But there is corruption. There is corruption always, and we have to do our best as a populace to try and control it. That's what Eisenhower's talking about. It's not left or right. It's what's right, period.
So it is right. It is left or right in the sense. No,
the right thing to do.
No, absolutely. And even as you were speaking, I was thinking, like, it just continues. Look at Qatar. Look at the foreign funding that we get to universities. And we can see how this all metastasized from this one noble and understandable pursuit to gear up for the possibility of continued wars, and how it's gone in all of these different directions, which really has led us here. So the good news of this is that we have people who are on top of it. But it is interesting that it does seem to be with the advent of Trump that this is all happening. I think if there was anything that really Trump ran on and contributed to his ascent, it was this. Because both Democrats and Republicans, what many are calling the uniparty, have been asleep at the switch with this. Because both stand to benefit from many of these programs, and many are members of the aforementioned elite. You follow the money, you go to them. And so Trump's populism, and him as an outsider, has really been the main thing. This has been it.
Look at the environmental industrial complex.
Oh my God, it goes on.
And the money that's funded to that. And that's what Eisenhower was warning against, mortgaging the future for today. There's not a lot of people that will tell you that the climate doesn't change, that we don't need to pay attention to this and work towards a better future that's cleaner. But we're not going to mortgage today for that. And so I just think his speech is so prophetic.
It is so prophetic.
Everyone should have to watch it and memorize it.
Absolutely. And oh gosh, let's see, if we were on Dennis and Julie, I would say bingo. Damn it. I promised you it was a good point. I forgot what the point was. No, it's true. I mean, we are spending so much money on all of these different things. I remember the point now. There are people who are my age, Sean, you may get a kick out of this, who literally cannot understand how we would be able to bulk up without huge amounts of government spending and government contracts. or with heavy taxes. I mean, I will have conversations with people and people will be like, well, how are we going to be able to do any of this? Can you imagine if we were just able to keep our income and we didn't have to donate our money to the federal government in order to spend on the environmental industrial complex and the DEI industrial complex? Can you imagine how much more money we would be able to put in the economy, how many more people we could employ, and how many more efficient things that we could actually do decided by the market if we just had the power to do it? But there are a lot of people who stand to benefit from getting all this. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, 74 million Americans voted for Donald Trump to drain the swamp. You know, people don't talk about this enough with him. So many people have been trying to explain why he won. And they're kind of hitting it. They're kind of saying DEI. They're kind of saying the border. But I really think after today's episode, I'm going to speak differently about it. It really is these different industrial complexes. And starting with something like Doge, just cutting that like fat out of a piece of meat. And on that note, shall I tell you about my pillow before I bid you adieu? I know you've been dying to hear about it. Well, right now you can get the standard My Pillow. That's right, standard. Available for just $14.88. That's a savings that is too good to pass up. There's a limit of 10 per customer, so don't wait to take advantage of this great deal now with the promo code Hartman. And there's more. You can take home a 4-piece kitchen set for only $25. Enjoy their new mattress topper starting at just $99.99, or pick up the luxurious MyPillow bed sheets starting at $49.98. Now, I sleep on a MyPillow. I use the My Slippers, the Giza Dream bed sheets, the My Towels kitchen and bath towel set. And I wouldn't advertise these if I didn't use them and didn't really love the product. So you should go to mypillow.com or call 1-800-566-6745 and use the promo code Hartman to unlock big discounts. Don't delay. Order today. Use the promo code Hartman at checkout. And again, just a reminder, you can get 45% off of this book, an excellent Christmas present, if you use the promo code Julie Hartman. They put in my first name for this, JulieHartman. You can get it for $19.80. Let me know what you think. You can email me at julie@julie-hartman.com. I love hearing from you, and I'll see you tomorrow at 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern.